Welcome to Tochi Stories. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on post notification because it will mean the whole world to me. Now let's get right into the story. Brace yourself. The chandeliers in the grand ballroom shimmered like falling stars as Zara Okafor smiled politely beside her fiancé, Brian Achuanya. Cameras flashed, journalists murmured, and high society guests whispered praises about the perfect match. Zara's father, Chief Gregory Okafor, Nigeria's most powerful real estate mogul, stood proudly among political elites and oil tycoons. The occasion was yet another high-profile gala meant to celebrate a new business merger, but to everyone watching, it felt like a pre-wedding celebration. Brian, son of Chief Achuanya, was tall, immaculately dressed, and every bit the poster child of the affluent elite. His charm was effortless in public, all teeth and tailored suits, and he knew how to impress. But as Zara's hand rested stiffly in his, her heart whispered the truth she dared not say aloud. She felt like a prisoner in a palace. She had everything money could buy: luxury cars, global fashion, private chefs. But none of it mattered when her soul was starving for connection. Behind closed doors, Brian was a different man. While the world saw him as a polished gentleman with charm and ambition, Zara saw the pride, the temper, and the cold detachment that left her crying alone in her room at night. He rarely asked about her dreams or passions, dismissing her love for art as a rich girl's hobby, and only touched her when it made him look good. Their conversations were dry, often revolving around appearances and what her father expected. Sometimes she caught him rolling his eyes when she spoke, other times he simply ignored her altogether. Despite all this, Zara kept trying. She was raised to endure, to be poised and submissive, and above all, to protect her family's legacy. Her late mother had warned her about arranged love, but her voice had long been buried under societal expectations. Chief Okafor believed Brian was the best option, influential, well-mannered, and from a powerful lineage. Zara was told it was her destiny. Yet, every time Brian's hands touched hers, she felt colder, not warmer. The weight of the expectations crushed her silently. Every morning was a routine of designer fittings, media rehearsals, and filtered photographs, curated to maintain a perfect image. Every night was lonelier than the one before. Brian seldom called unless he needed something: a favor, publicity support, or someone to show off on social media. She had tried to spark conversations, planned romantic dinners, even made efforts to connect with his interests. But it always came back to his ego. He loved being seen with her, not because of who she was, but because of what she represented, the crown jewel of the Okafor empire. Zara had once dreamed of marrying for love, raising a family filled with laughter and support, not pretense and silence. But each passing day dulled those dreams. On the outside, she smiled as the cameras flashed, but inside, she whispered to herself, "This can't be all there is." Zara believed, or rather hoped, that if she loved Brian harder, he would change. She tried to be everything he might want: glamorous yet gentle, accommodating yet intelligent, patient even when he was cold. She scheduled weekly dinner dates, even flew in a rare cognac from France for his birthday, only for Brian to show up 2 hours late, barely say thank you, and leave halfway through dessert to take a call. When she sent sweet texts, he replied with emojis. When she offered to help him with his new project, he laughed and said, "That's cute. Just smile and look pretty, Zara." Still, she endured, because deep down, she feared failure, not the romantic kind, but the kind that would disappoint her father and disgrace her family name. She was supposed to be the obedient daughter, the trophy fiancé, the one who brought pride to the Okafors. The truth shattered her one evening when she borrowed Brian's iPad to check her email. A message notification popped up from Amaka Redheart, her closest friend since secondary school. Curiosity turned into devastation as she opened a string of messages: explicit photos, flirtatious notes, and worst of all, a video of Brian and Amaka together, laughing, drinking, kissing, on the very night he told Zara he was on a business trip. She dropped the tablet as if it burned her hands. Her legs wobbled beneath her. Her heart pounded so loudly she couldn't hear anything else. For several minutes, she sat on the floor of his penthouse, unable to cry, unable to scream. Just silence. pure, suffocating silence. Amaka, the girl she once called sister. Brian, the man she was about to marry. And they had both betrayed her with such arrogance, such ease. Zara didn't confront them immediately. She didn't storm into rooms or post cryptic messages on social media. No, she buried it. She buried the pain because she wasn't ready to face the public humiliation. Instead, she distanced herself quietly. She rejected his kisses. She stopped trying. But Brian didn't notice. He was too full of himself, surrounded by friends who hyped him, money that blinded him, and women who flattered his ego. Every time Zara thought about the messages, her chest tightened. Yet she told no one, not even her father. Because to him, Brian was still the perfect son-in-law. And Zara, she was just a daughter, not a person with real heartbreak. Even though the betrayal gnawed at her daily, she smiled for the world. But inside, something was dying. It was a warm Saturday afternoon when Zara finally decided to give love one more chance. She had planned a surprise weekend getaway for Brian at a private beach resort, booked the suite, arranged his favorite meals, even wrote a handwritten note that ended with "Maybe we can start again." She got the house keys from his assistant and decided to surprise him at home before they left. The moment she stepped into the mansion, the air felt heavy. The staff greeted her nervously, and her instincts screamed that something wasn't right. She walked up the grand staircase slowly, hearing muffled giggles from the guest room. Her heart beat louder with every step. She turned the handle and pushed the door open, and her world shattered all over again. There he was, Brian, in bed with one of the new maids, both of them half-naked, tangled in sheets, laughing. When they saw her, the maid screamed and rushed to cover herself. But Brian? He didn't flinch. He didn't stutter. Instead, he sat up, wiped his mouth, and said coldly, "What are you doing here unannounced?" Zara stood frozen. The pain in her chest felt like knives. She had caught him, again, and he wasn't even sorry. With shaking hands, she whispered, "How could you?" That was when Brian stood up, walked towards her, and without warning, slapped her across the face. "You think you can control me? You're lucky I even pretend to love you," he spat. She stumbled back, one hand on her cheek, tears blurring her vision. That slap wasn't just physical, it was symbolic. He wasn't just cheating, he was unashamed of it. Zara didn't wait for his excuses. She ran down the stairs barefoot, ignoring the shocked looks from the staff. Her designer dress clung to her skin as sweat and tears mingled down her face. She got into her car and drove with no destination, just away. Away from him. Away from everything. Her hands trembled on the wheel. Her heart was broken beyond repair. Everything she had sacrificed to make the relationship work, her pride, her dignity, her peace, had been thrown back at her with violence. It was the moment she realized Brian didn't just cheat on her, he never loved her. And maybe he never even respected her. For the first time in her life, Zara Okafor wasn't just sad, she was angry. And that anger would lead her into a world where her soul would finally be seen by the last man she ever expected. Zara drove for hours, unsure of where she was going, blinded by tears and raw humiliation. The slap still burned her cheek like a mark of shame, but the deeper wound was within. She thought the betrayal by Amaka was the peak of her pain, but Brian's violent arrogance proved her heart still had further depths to fall. As she drove out of the city toward the outskirts, she ignored the concerned calls from her driver and security detail. She needed air. She needed space. The chaos inside her could no longer be silenced with wealth or titles. She turned off the main road and entered a congested rural community, muddy streets, market stalls, and tired people moving with purpose. She parked by a roadside art shop to collect her breath, her tinted SUV now oddly out of place. She stepped out, hoping to find inspiration or even distraction in the hand-carved sculptures and raw paintings lined across dusty wooden tables. But even here, peace wouldn't find her. She wandered a few stalls down, trying to keep her face low, but it wasn't long before trouble approached. A group of idle boys loitering near a closed barber shop began to follow her, whistling and jeering. At first, she ignored them, but when one of them grabbed her purse and another tugged her hair, panic struck. She screamed, trying to fight back, but they surrounded her quickly. "Fine girl like you no day walka here alone," one of them mocked. She struggled, slapping hands away, clutching her handbag like her life depended on it. Her designer heels made it hard to run, and her expensive perfume only made her more of a target. She yelled again, but no one moved. Most people avoided trouble in neighborhoods like this. Just when it felt like she would be dragged to the ground, a loud metallic clang rang out, followed by the sharp voice of a man shouting, "Leave her alone, or I'll break every bone in your body." The crowd parted. A tall, dark-skinned man stepped into the scene, holding a thick iron rod, his voice steady and filled with command. It wasn't just his size that intimidated the hoodlums. It was the fury in his eyes. Without hesitation, he shoved two of the boys aside, grabbed another by the collar, and threw him to the ground. The others scattered. Zara fell back, shaking, her hair loose and face pale with fear. The man dropped the rod and helped her up gently. "You shouldn't be here alone," he said quietly. She looked into his eyes, not the polished kind like Brian's, but eyes that knew pain, knew sweat, knew survival. "Are you all right?" he asked again. She nodded weakly. He noticed her luxury SUV and her gold earrings. "You're not from here," he muttered. "Come with me. It's not safe." She didn't argue. She didn't care who he was. All she knew was that for the first time that day, someone had stepped in to protect her, not because of status or fame, but because she was human. Emeka's workshop was barely a 15-minute walk from the market, tucked behind a row of weather-beaten kiosks and metal scraps. It was nothing like Zara had ever seen, a modest wooden structure with tools hung on nails, iron rods stacked in corners, and charcoal burns blackening the walls. Yet there was something strangely warm about it. "Sit," Emeka said, dragging over a bench. She sat quietly, her heart still thudding. He handed her a bottle of water, wiping the sweat from his forehead with a rag. His arms were muscular and dusted with soot, his shirt torn at the collar, and yet he exuded a calm strength, not boastful like Brian, but rooted in something deeper. "You all right now?" he asked again. She nodded, then finally found her voice. "Thank you. I don't even know your name." "Emeka," he said. "And you?" She hesitated for a second. If he knew she was the daughter of Chief Gregory Okafor, the story could spiral out of control. "Z," she replied. "I'm a student. Final year. Art major. I came to collect materials for my final project." It wasn't fully a lie. She did love art and had a passion for handcrafted pieces, though she was far from a university student. Emeka accepted her words without suspicion. He simply nodded. "The world needs more people who see beauty in the forgotten," he said, gesturing toward his rusted sculptures. "Even broken metal can be molded into something strong again." The words pierced her. Was he just talking about art, or something deeper? She stayed longer than she expected, watching him mold iron into floral shapes with nothing but fire, a hammer, and his patience. She asked him questions about the tools, the process, and his late father who taught him the craft. He spoke without resentment, though the poverty surrounding him was loud. She felt strangely safe here. The buzz of Lagos silenced, the pressure of image lifted. No one cared who she was. And Emeka, with his strong hands and soft-spoken wisdom, treated her not like a fragile doll or a rich girl, but like a person with a soul. By sunset, she didn't want to leave. Emeka offered her the only plate of food he had, yam porridge slightly burnt, and apologized for how common it was. She nearly cried. "It's perfect," she said. It was the first meal in weeks she could eat without anxiety or pretense. Before she left, he handed her a small iron pendant, a hand holding a heart. "I made it for a customer who never came," he said. "You can keep it." She stared at it in awe. Handmade, imperfect, beautiful. As she drove away that night, she clutched the pendant tightly. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel hollow. She didn't know what would come of this strange connection, but something inside her whispered, "Don't let this go." The next few weeks blurred into moments Zara never thought she'd experience. Every time she left the mansion, often lying to the security team that she was attending art seminars, she drove back to that humble part of town. She'd arrive in oversized sunglasses and jeans, leaving her branded items locked in the car. Emeka always smiled when he saw her, and that smile alone melted away the sadness that had once dominated her mornings. He taught her how to hold a hammer, how to recognize metal types by their ring, and how to create sparks from stone and steel. At first, she came out of curiosity, but soon it became something deeper, a place where she wasn't the CEO's daughter or Brian's fiancée, but simply Z, the girl who laughed at her own mistakes and found joy in dirt under her nails. The more time she spent around him, the more she realized how much her world had been built on appearances. Emeka had no cars, no staff, no marble floors or gold chandeliers. But he had depth, a rich soul, layered with kindness, patience, and pain he never weaponized. He'd give the little he had to hungry neighbors and spent hours tending to his ailing mother without complaint. One evening, as they sat on an old bench watching the sunset, Emeka talked about how he had dreams of building a school to teach young boys blacksmithing, to give them a skill they could own, unlike him who had inherited both a dying craft and a broken legacy. Zara's eyes welled with tears. Brian never once talked about helping anyone. His dreams were always about conquest, more money, bigger deals, louder parties. Emeka's dreams were quiet, but filled with purpose. She watched him share his food with a barefoot boy who had been silently watching from the gate, and her heart swelled. This is what love is supposed to feel like, she thought. Still, guilt gnawed at her. She hadn't told him who she really was. Every time she thought about confessing, fear held her back. What if he pushed her away? What if he thought she was mocking his world? For now, she let the lie live a little longer, because her time with him felt like a dream she wasn't ready to wake up from. Her visits became frequent. She would help in the workshop during the day and listen to his stories at night. She even began sketching again, real art, not the filtered, shallow things she used to create for fashion blogs. Each stroke felt freer. Emeka had unknowingly helped her reclaim parts of herself that had been buried beneath the weight of societal expectations. And each day she left that workshop, she left a little more of the old Zara behind. The changes in Zara didn't come overnight, but they were undeniable. At first it was subtle, a lighter step in her walk, the natural smiles that now graced her face instead of the fake ones crafted for cameras. Her staff noticed she no longer requested daily makeup appointments or luxury outfits. She spent less time attending corporate events, dinners, and the constant high society meetings her father arranged. Instead, she'd often say she was working on something personal. Truth was, she was spending more and more time with Emeka. Every hour in his company stripped her of a lifetime of pretense and reminded her that love didn't need chandeliers or tailored suits. Sometimes they would sit in silence at the edge of his workshop, watching children chase kites made of old newspapers. And in those moments, Zara felt something she hadn't felt since her mother died. Peace. Their bond deepened in ways even Zara couldn't explain. Emeka, despite having so little, treated her like royalty, not because of wealth or reputation, but because he respected her soul. He never raised his voice, never belittled her opinions, and never used her past against her. The way he looked at her made her believe she was more than a pretty face or a name on a tabloid. And when she helped him repair an old gate for a widow, getting grease on her designer top, she laughed instead of screamed. Emeka smiled at her, that smile that started slow and reached his eyes. "You're not like most rich girls," he said one evening, after they finished a pot of roasted yam together. Zara looked at him, the words sticking in her throat. She wanted to say everything, who she was, who her father was, who she was engaged to, but her heart wasn't ready. All she knew was that Emeka saw her for who she was becoming, not who she had been forced to be. Meanwhile, her absence didn't go unnoticed. Brian's calls became more frequent, his tone more entitled. "Where are you? Why aren't you at the meeting? Do you have any idea how this makes me look?" She ignored him for days, sending short replies only when necessary. Her father, Chief Okafor, began to ask questions as well, especially after Zara missed a dinner with foreign investors. "I've been tired," she lied. "I need a break." But the truth was, her soul was starving for something real, and she had finally found it. With Emeka, time didn't feel like something to fill. It felt like something to cherish. Yet she knew it couldn't last like this forever. She couldn't keep living in both worlds, one built on expectations, the other on freedom. The more she stayed away from Brian, the more she feared the day he would come searching. And when he did, the consequences would be devastating. One evening, after a long day of working side by side, Emeka shared a part of himself that he rarely spoke of. The sky was darkening, painted in hues of orange and purple, as they sat outside the workshop eating roasted plantain wrapped in old newspaper. A quiet breeze danced through the trees. Emeka looked down at his hands, hardened by years of labor, blistered but steady, and said, "You know, my father died working for men like yours." Zara stiffened slightly. "Men like mine?" she asked cautiously. He nodded. "Rich men. Powerful men. My father was a welder for a company that cut corners for profit. They didn't fix a faulty gas tank. It exploded one morning while he was trying to protect his team. He died, and they paid my mother just enough to keep her quiet." He paused. "I was 15. We lost everything. Our house, our dignity. But I swore I'd never beg. I'd build my life with my own hands, even if it took forever." Zara didn't know what to say. His story shook her. She suddenly realized just how deep the gap between their worlds ran. Her father had probably been one of those men like yours, in more ways than one. She wanted to tell Emeka the truth, that she was one of them. But fear gripped her. Would he see her differently? Would he think she had come into his life as a cruel joke? So instead, she reached for his hand. "I'm sorry you went through that," she whispered. "You didn't deserve it. Your father didn't deserve it." Emeka smiled faintly. "It made me who I am. I don't hate the rich. I just don't worship them." That night, Zara couldn't sleep. She lay in bed thinking of her father's empire, built on land others were forced to sell, run by people like Brian who couldn't care less about lives like Emeka's. She started to wonder whether love, real love, could truly survive between two people raised on opposite ends of the fire. Despite everything, her feelings for Emeka continued to grow. The way he spoke to elderly women with gentle respect. The way he carried children on his back while fixing their mother's doors. The way he smiled when he finished a difficult project, wiping sweat from his brow like a man who had conquered something noble. Zara wasn't just attracted to him, she admired him. She hadn't felt this way with Brian, not even once. With Emeka, every moment felt unfiltered, honest, and safe. She didn't need to impress or pretend. He made her laugh with his dry jokes and challenged her when she tried to take shortcuts during work. He encouraged her drawings, even carved one of her designs into metal as a gift. She was falling in love, truly, for the first time in her life. But deep down a part of her knew, this joy wasn't going to come without a price. Brian's pride had limits, and Zara's silence was beginning to scratch the very edge of it. At first, he thought she was playing hard to get, maybe punishing him for past behavior. But after 3 weeks of unanswered calls, postponed dinners, and flat-out rejections, Brian began to stew. His friends started asking awkward questions at clubs. His father even pulled him aside, warning that the Okafors wouldn't tolerate disrespect. "Control her," the elder Achuanyu barked. Brian assured him it was nothing, but inside, his ego was unraveling. So, one evening, he followed her. He paid a member of her security team a generous sum to trace her location and provide updates. The man was reluctant at first, but Greed won over loyalty. And what Brian saw broke him, not in sadness, but in rage. Zara, the billionaire's daughter, was sitting outside a filthy iron workshop with a blacksmith, laughing, relaxed, dressed in jeans and slippers like she belonged there. And the way she looked at him, with admiration, was the final insult. Brian didn't confront her immediately. He went straight to Chief Okafor's mansion, barging into his office with fury in his voice. "Do you know where your daughter is?" he roared. "She's with a common blacksmith in the slums." Chief Okafor froze mid-sip of his whiskey. "What nonsense are you saying? She's spending her days with some broke welder, laughing like she's found paradise in the dirt. That girl is embarrassing your legacy." The room fell silent. The chief clenched his jaw, staring out the window. His daughter, his carefully groomed heir, was mingling with someone he would never even allow near his gates. "Bring her home," he said coldly, "and get rid of whoever he is." Brian nodded, eyes burning. "I'll handle it." In his mind, Zara had disrespected him, mocked him, and tarnished his image. She had chosen dirt over diamonds. He wouldn't let that go unpunished. Brian returned to his car and slammed the door shut, his fingers gripping the steering wheel with fury. He wasn't used to rejection, let alone from a woman beneath him. To think she would pick a nobody, a filthy blacksmith over him, the son of one of Nigeria's richest men, was more than betrayal. It was humiliation. He called one of his boys, someone known for handling messy problems, and gave a chilling instruction. "Find out where this bastard works. If I ever see him near her again, I'll burn that whole place to the ground." His voice was calm, but it carried venom. For Brian, it wasn't about love anymore. It was about control. Zara was his trophy, his possession, and no blacksmith was going to steal her away without paying a price. The black SUV pulled up to the blacksmith's workshop like a shadow descending on a peaceful dream. Zara had just arrived, smiling and waving at the children who often gathered around to admire her sketches, when her father's security men stepped out. Emeka stood beside her, confused but alert. The lead guard walked directly to Zara, ignoring Emeka entirely. "Your father requests your presence immediately," he said with a robotic calmness that felt more like a command than a request. Zara stiffened. "I'm busy. Tell him I'll return later," she replied without flinching. But the man stepped forward, his voice firmer. "Chief Okafor said now, or we take you." Emeka moved closer, stepping between them instinctively. "She said she'll return later," he echoed, his voice calm but protective. The guard looked at him with contempt. "This doesn't concern you." For a moment, everything stood still, two worlds about to collide. Zara finally intervened. "I'll go," she said, her heart pounding. "But tell my father if he wants to speak to me, he better be ready to listen." The moment she stepped into her father's mansion, the atmosphere choked her like thick smoke. Chief Okafor sat in his study, the heavy mahogany desk acting like a barrier between them. His face was calm, but his eyes flared with fury. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he began, voice quiet but sharp. Zara stood tall. "Living my life." He slammed his hand on the table. "With a blacksmith? Do you know how much damage you're doing to this family's reputation? Do you know what people will say when they find out my daughter has been sneaking off to roll around in the dirt with a nobody?" Zara winced at the cruelty of his words. "He has more heart than any man you've ever introduced to me," she snapped. Her father leaned back and gave a bitter laugh. "Heart doesn't pay bills, my dear. Heart doesn't build empires. You were born for more than this nonsense." Then he paused, staring coldly at her. "End it now, or I will. And trust me, you won't like how I handle things." Zara's voice trembled, but she didn't break. "I won't let you dictate my life anymore. Not my heart." Her father's eyes narrowed. "I built this life for you. Every diamond, every silk sheet, every chauffeur, that was me. And you repay me by throwing yourself at a man who is nothing." Zara stepped forward, breathing hard. "Maybe that's why it means something. Because with him, I'm not a puppet on a stage." Chief Okafor stood up, towering over her. "If you don't end this, I'll have his shop shut down. I'll bury his name so deep no one will remember he ever existed. And Brian," he sneered, "is not a man you humiliate and expect to walk away free. He's not as patient as I am." Zara left the mansion with tears stinging her eyes. She had always known her father was powerful, but now she saw how far he was willing to go. What began as love was now a war, one where the stakes were rising, and Emeka's life could be caught in the crossfire. The walls of her room at the mansion had once brought her comfort, but now they felt like the bars of a silent prison. Zara curled up on the couch in her nightwear, her phone face down beside her, the screen dark with dozens of missed calls and unread messages, mostly from Brian, some from her father's assistant. Her heart ached in places she didn't know existed. She had fought so hard to carve out a small space of happiness, and now the very people who claimed to love her were tearing it apart. She remembered the innocence of her first sketchbook as a teenager, when she used to draw freely and imagine a world where love was real. Now she found herself hiding, afraid, and emotionally exhausted. She tried to cry, but the tears wouldn't fall. Her body felt drained. Her soul felt bruised. Her father's threat echoed in her mind like a sinister chant. I'll bury his name. I'll shut him down. It wasn't just her love at risk. It was Emeka's livelihood, his dignity, and the only life he had worked so hard to build. She opened her mother's old diary, the one she had kept locked away since her passing. Her mother had once written, "Real love will demand sacrifice. But don't let the world teach you that love isn't worth the cost. Just be sure it's love, not desperation, you're holding on to." The words hit harder now than they ever had. Zara questioned everything, not her love for Emeka, but whether she had the strength to keep holding it. Was she being selfish by staying in his life, knowing her father and Brian would stop at nothing to ruin him? Would Emeka survive the wrath of two titans? She began to spiral, imagining Brian sending thugs to destroy his shop, her father pulling strings to deny Emeka permits and licenses, perhaps even framing him for crimes he didn't commit. What if her presence in Emeka's life became his curse instead of his blessing? For the first time, Zara wasn't sure if love alone was enough. Sleep refused to come. She stared at the ceiling for hours, replaying every smile, every laugh, every moment Emeka looked at her like she was more than a trophy, like she was enough. She clutched the pendant he gave her, the hand holding a heart, now worn and warm from her fingers, constantly touching it. By dawn, her decision was made, but it crushed her. She would see him again one last time. Not to be with him, but to protect him. If loving her brought him pain, then letting go would be her only act of love. And so, she prepared herself. Not with makeup or jewelry, but with quiet resolve. This heartbreak wasn't something she could cry about in the tabloids. It was the kind that sits in your bones, changes your walk, and makes you question if you'll ever smile the same again. Zara never made it to Emeka's workshop the next day. Instead, a young girl from the community ran up to her car as she parked near the corner, holding a folded piece of paper wrapped in brown leather twine. "He say make I give you," the girl said softly. Zara took the note with trembling hands. She knew immediately what it was before even opening it. There was something final in the way it was tied, in the neatness of the folds, and in the quiet voice of the messenger. She didn't open it right away. She sat in her car, holding it like a fragile heart. The world outside continued with its chaos, people yelling, vendors selling, life moving on. But inside the vehicle, time stopped. She finally unfolded it, her eyes moving over each word with disbelief and pain. Emeka's handwriting was rough but clear, his message both simple and shattering. He wrote, "Z, I don't know your real name, and maybe that's for the best. But I know you came from a world I don't belong to, and that world will do anything to make sure I'm erased from your story. I've seen it in the way your eyes flicker with fear, in the silence you hold when your phone rings, and in the sadness you try to hide when you think I'm not looking. I wish I could fight the world for you, but I've fought so many battles alone already. I'm tired. I'm just a man with fire in his hands, not power in his name. And you were the light I never thought I'd hold. But I can't let you burn for me, and I won't let them burn me for loving you. So I'm letting go before they take more from me. I hope one day you'll understand. If this is the last time you hear from me, know that you were my brightest chapter." Zara clutched the paper to her chest as her tears finally broke free, violent, uncontrollable sobs that rocked her body. It wasn't just a letter. It was a goodbye. A silent, humble goodbye from a man who loved her deeply, but had no armor against the world that raised her. She felt anger, sorrow, guilt, all at once. She hated how powerless she felt. Emeka hadn't blamed her. He had protected her even in his parting. But that made it hurt more, because she didn't want to be protected anymore. She wanted to fight, for once, not to please her father, not to polish Brian's ego, but for her heart. That evening, she stared at the city skyline from her window, the lights shimmering like stars on the verge of dying out. She whispered, "You don't get to walk away, Emeka. Not like this." The battle wasn't over. Not yet. The banquet hall shimmered with wealth. Golden chandeliers hung like constellations above, and violins echoed through the crystal glasses and polished marble floors. It was the annual Unity Ball, and for the first time in weeks, Zara made a public appearance. Her father had insisted, calling it a non-negotiable family obligation. He wanted her beside Brian, to squash rumors that their engagement was rocky. Reporters buzzed at the entrance, eager to capture the golden couple. Brian gripped her waist possessively as they posed, his smile radiant for the cameras, while hers was stiff, hollow. Behind the red carpet glamour, her soul screamed. She was wearing a designer gown, but it felt like a noose. And Brian's touch? It was colder than ice. He hadn't apologized for anything, not the cheating, not the slap. And yet here he was, pretending to be the man of the hour. Inside, the deception deepened. Brian charmed the crowd with ease, tossing expensive compliments and hollow laughter around like confetti. Every time Zara tried to walk away, he pulled her back. "Smile," he whispered through clenched teeth. "You're making us look bad." She forced herself to sip wine, nod at investors, and pretend she hadn't just spent days crying over a man who wrote her a goodbye letter, soaked in dignity and pain. But as the evening wore on, her mask began to slip. She caught Brian shamelessly flirting with one of the event hosts, his hands lingering too long, his eyes undressing her from across the room. Zara turned away, her stomach churning. She moved to the bathroom, needing space, but even there, she overheard whispers. "Isn't that the girl who's been hiding in the slums? I heard she's with a blacksmith now. Disgraceful." When she returned, Brian was laughing at the bar, arm around a model from a local magazine shoot. Zara walked straight up to him. "I'm leaving," she said quietly. Brian chuckled without looking at her. "You'll stay until the press leaves. Don't embarrass yourself more than you already have." That was the last straw. Something snapped in her. She reached for her wine glass, calmly poured it onto his white tuxedo, and turned away as gasps rose across the room. Her father watched from a distance, his jaw clenched, but he didn't move. The whispers grew louder. Zara exited the hall, heels in hand, heart racing, not from shame, but from liberation. The chains were breaking. That night, she didn't return to the mansion. She drove to a quiet inn near Emika's community, booked a single room, and cried herself to sleep holding the pendant he had once given her. She was done playing the part, done pretending. What she didn't know was that Emika's world had already begun to unravel too, and the wreckage was waiting. The next morning, with barely 4 hours of sleep and swollen eyes, Zara tied her braids back, dressed in a plain t-shirt and jeans, and walked through the dusty road toward Emika's workshop. The streets were familiar now. Children waved at her, vendors smiled, though some looked at her with curiosity, sensing something had changed. But nothing prepared her for what she found at the end of the road. Emika's workshop was a skeleton of what it used to be. The signboard was burnt, the roof partially caved in, and soot clung to the charred walls like a warning. Her heart stopped. She ran forward, calling his name, but the place was empty. She peeked through the remains, seeing twisted metal scraps, broken tools, and a life that had clearly been attacked. "They came at night," a voice said behind her. She turned. It was Mama Eben, an old woman from the area. 3 men. They poured petrol and left. Said it was a warning. Zara fell to her knees. Rage and guilt exploded in her chest. She had feared this, and yet it happened anyway. "Where is he? Where's Emika?" she asked, her voice shaking. Mama Eben led her to a nearby house, Emika's neighbor, where he had taken shelter. When she entered the small, dimly lit room, she found him tending to his mother, whose coughs echoed through the air. Emika's shirt was torn, his arm bandaged, but his face remained calm. He looked up as she entered, the tension between them thick with unspoken words. "You shouldn't be here," he said gently. Zara shook her head. "No, I should have never left." He sighed, helping his mother take her medicine before sitting beside the wall. "I told you this would happen. You can't protect me from your world, Zara. It's poison." Her eyes filled with tears. "Then let me be the antidote." He didn't speak for a while. She sat beside him in silence, breathing in the soot, the pain, the loss. "I saw what they did," she said, voice cracking. "I know it was Brian. I know my father didn't stop it. And still, I'm here. Because you're the only place I've ever felt free." Emeka looked at her, exhaustion behind his eyes. "What now? You stay until they burn everything again." Zara took his hand. "I'll stay even if they burn me too." Her words weren't poetic. They were raw, filled with pain and defiance. That day, they sat in the ruins of what once was a broken workshop, a broken love. But out of it came something stronger. Forgiveness. Reconnection. The beginning of a deeper bond. She promised to help him rebuild, not just the workshop, but his faith in her. This time, she wasn't walking away. And even if the world came again, with fire and fists, she was ready to fight. Chief Gregory Okafor arrived in a convoy of 4 black SUVs, the sound of their engines slicing through the morning air like thunder. Residents of the slum gathered to watch, whispering and pointing. It wasn't every day that the nation's most powerful real estate tycoon descended into the trenches. His face was expressionless as he stepped out, clad in a perfectly pressed native attire, eyes hidden behind dark sunglasses. He walked slowly through the narrow street, stopping only when he reached the entrance of the small compound where Zara now stayed with Emeka. She heard the engines first, then the heavy knocks on the door. She opened it to see her father standing there, arms crossed, guards behind him like shadows. "We need to talk," he said, his voice cutting through the air. She didn't invite him in. "Then say what you came to say." He stepped closer. "I gave you every privilege, every luxury, every opportunity. And this is how you thank me." Zara didn't flinch. "No, this is how I finally breathe." His jaw tightened. "You're throwing your life away for a man with nothing. A man whose kind is beneath you. And for what? Romance? Poverty?" She looked him dead in the eye. "For peace. For truth. For something that isn't laced with fear and control." Chief Okafor took off his glasses, his expression softening for a fleeting second. "You don't understand what you're doing. This is not just about you, Zara. You're embarrassing this family. You're embarrassing me." Her voice rose for the first time. "Then be embarrassed. Because I'd rather be poor with Emeka than rich beside a monster who cheats and lies and slaps me in front of staff." Silence stretched between them. Chief Okafor stared at her, truly seeing her. Not the daughter in a gown, not the heiress, but a woman standing in defiance of everything he built. "You walk away now, there's no coming back," he warned. "You won't get the inheritance. You won't get the business. I'll cut you off completely." Zara smiled sadly. "Then cut me. But don't expect me to bleed loyalty to a life that never let me live." She shut the door slowly, her fingers trembling, her heart pounding. On the other side, Chief Okafor stood still, his pride wounded deeper than he would admit. As the convoy pulled away, Zara collapsed into Emeka's arms. The fight had just begun, but for the first time, she wasn't running. She had chosen her path, and even if it led through fire, she would walk it, hand in hand with the man they all tried to erase. Zara awoke to the sound of clanging metal and the smell of burning coal, far removed from the soft linens and morning incense of her father's estate. The room she now lived in was barely 10 square meters wide, with a single bed against the wall and a cracked window letting in both sunlight and dust. Emeka had offered to sleep on the floor, and despite her protests he insisted, not because he pitied her, but because he respected her. The floor was cold, the bucket bath colder, but Zara didn't complain. She fetched water in old yellow containers, cleaned the compound, and helped cook over an open fire. Each day peeled away another layer of her old life. No housemaids, no air conditioning, no driver, just the rhythm of survival, and strangely, the rhythm of purpose. Every time she held a hammer, she felt her spirit forging something stronger, not in metal, but in herself. The neighbors were skeptical at first. Some whispered that she was just playing poor, that she'd return to her mansion after a week or two. Others welcomed her kindly, offering food and advice about how to make pap without clumps or light a coal stove in the rain. But what moved Zara most was Emeka's quiet humility. He never boasted, never treated her like she didn't belong. Instead, he became her teacher, in craft and in life. He taught her how to mold and melt metal, how to read the wind before a storm, and how to barter without being cheated at the market. One afternoon, when she tripped and spilled melted tin across the floor, she braced for the kind of shouting Brian used to hurl at her. But Emeka only smiled and said, "You'll get better. We all start somewhere." That gentle patience was more precious than any diamond. At night, they sat under the stars, sometimes in silence, sometimes sharing dreams that felt impossible but beautiful. Emeka spoke of wanting to build a new workshop, one with clean tools and apprentices who didn't have to beg for opportunities. Zara shared her dream of starting a line of handcrafted art fused with metal, something authentic, raw, and full of meaning. The poverty didn't scare her anymore. It grounded her. Her skin tanned, her fingers blistered, but her spirit glowed. This wasn't the kind of life her father had envisioned for her, but it was the first time she ever felt free. She hadn't just left wealth behind. She had found dignity. The kind Brian never understood. The kind her father couldn't control. And every time Emeka smiled at her, without wanting anything in return, she knew she was exactly where she needed to be, even if the peace would be short-lived. Brian Achuanya had always been the center of attention, in clubs, on red carpets, at boardroom tables. He was used to cameras flashing when he walked into a room, used to women leaning into him even before he spoke. But lately, the shine had begun to fade. Since Zara disappeared from the public eye and the news of her distancing from the family made rounds, Brian's reputation took a hit. Investors began to question his maturity. His father grew colder in meetings. "Fix it," the old man barked one morning, tossing a newspaper on the desk that read, "Okafor heiress missing from Brian's gala speech." Brian smiled and said he had everything under control, but the truth gnawed at him. His ego couldn't comprehend that someone like Zara would leave him for a nobody. And the more she ignored him, the more unhinged he became. He started drinking more, clubbing harder, and surrounding himself with shallow validation. Women came and went, models, influencers, even ex-girlfriends who once hated him. But none of it touched the growing emptiness inside him. He saw Zara's face everywhere, on the runway, in commercials, in the quiet of his mansion where her laughter used to echo. But instead of regret, all he felt was rage. She was supposed to be mine. That's what he told himself as he scrolled through the photos his hired man had taken. Blurry images of Zara carrying firewood, sweeping the front of Emeka's compound, smiling with children like she had found a purpose. Brian clenched his jaw. "You think you're happy?" he muttered. "Let's see how long that lasts." His pride couldn't take the humiliation. He had to strike back, not just to get her attention, but to prove that without him, her world would collapse. So he began plotting. He started with whispers, calls to community leaders asking about Emeka's records, offering bribes for permits to be revoked. When that didn't scare Zara away, he went darker. He hired 2 men, men who didn't ask questions, only obeyed. "Make him disappear for a while," he said casually. "Burn his little kingdom down if you have to. Just make sure she knows who did it." His voice carried the coldness of someone used to getting what he wanted. It wasn't about Zara anymore. It was about power. She had chosen to humiliate him in front of the elite, to walk away like he wasn't enough. That couldn't go unpunished. He lit a cigarette and stared at the screen. One more photo of Zara laughing with Emeka under the sun. "You want to play poor?" he whispered. "Let's see how well you survive when everything you love turns to ash." It happened on a Sunday night. Zara and Emeka had just finished a small meal of boiled maize and groundnuts. Emeka was tired from a long day fixing metal gates for 3 different clients, while Zara had spent the afternoon drawing new jewelry concepts using recycled steel. The 2 sat in front of the workshop, legs stretched out, hands lightly touching. The silence was peaceful, a kind of silence that only love can make sacred. But peace, in their world, never lasted long. Around 10 p.m., just as they were about to go inside, they heard footsteps. Not the casual kind, but calculated, heavy, and fast. Zara's breath caught. Emeka stood, instinctively moving in front of her. Out of the shadows came three masked men, one holding a jerry can, another a machete, and the third holding a crowbar. "What do you want?" Emeka shouted, reaching for the nearby iron bar he kept near the door. The men said nothing. One of them poured the contents of the can gasoline across the wooden pillars of the shop. Zara screamed. Emeka lunged forward, fighting off the man with the crowbar, but the third attacker struck him from behind. Chaos erupted. Zara tried to drag Emeka away, blood on his head, while flames began to lick the edges of the wooden structure. The fire crackled louder with every second. Neighbors rushed out in panic, some throwing water, others calling for help. Emeka managed to push Zara away from the burning entrance, just as the structure collapsed inward. The shop, his life's work, was reduced to a pile of glowing rubble. The smell of smoke and blood filled the air, and sirens howled in the distance. But in that moment, none of it mattered more than the lifeless way Emeka collapsed into Zara's arms. She screamed for help, her voice raw, as they rushed him to the nearest clinic, a small, underfunded building with 2 nurses and flickering bulbs. Zara held Emeka's hand the entire ride, whispering, "Stay with me, please. Don't leave me too." When the nurse asked for payment before treatment, Zara handed over her jewelry, her earrings, her mother's bracelet, everything she had. The doctor began work. Zara sat in the corridor, her dress stained with blood and soot, trembling uncontrollably. Her world, once again, had been set on fire, literally. But this time, she knew who lit the match. Brian. He had sent a message. A violent, brutal message. And now, as she watched Emeka fight for his life, Zara swore under her breath, "This war is no longer about love. It's about survival. And I will not lose." Chief Gregory Okafor didn't come to the slums with flashing lights or a media team this time. He arrived quietly, alone, his driver instructed to wait at the main road. There was no bodyguard, no protocol. He wore a plain white kaftan, his face marked with visible concern. He hadn't heard from Zara since the Unity Ball fiasco, and though he told himself she would crawl back once her fantasy crumbled, a call from one of his men changed everything. "The boy's shop is gone, sir. They set it on fire. The girl, she was there." Those words hit him harder than he expected. He drove out in silence, not to bring her home, but to see for himself what her rebellion had cost her. And what he found broke through his pride in ways he hadn't anticipated. The workshop was now just ashes, smoldering planks, blackened iron, and melted tools twisted like corpses. Neighbors murmured as they recognized the man who once appeared on magazine covers, now standing before them in a heap of his daughter's chosen ruin. But it wasn't the wreckage that moved Chief Okafor. It was what he saw through the small clinic window beside the site. His daughter sitting on a plastic chair, her head bowed, hands clasped over Emeka's bandaged one. Her hair was messy, her once golden skin now bruised and darkened by smoke. She looked nothing like the heiress he raised. And yet, for the first time in his life, he saw her whole. No jewelry, no spotlight, just Zara, holding on to love like a lifeline. She wasn't crying. She wasn't begging. She wasn't even afraid. She was there, present, strong. And something inside Chief Okafor cracked. He stepped back, retreating to the shadows before she could see him. In that moment, his empire, his power, his reputation, all the things he built, felt smaller than her resolve. Zara had chosen this path knowing it would come with suffering, and yet she stayed. That wasn't recklessness. That was conviction. On his way back to the car, he told his driver, "Don't interfere anymore. Whatever she chooses, let her be." For the first time, he admitted that his daughter wasn't a pawn. She was fire. Forged not in boardrooms or press conferences, but in the ashes of a blacksmith's ruin. That night, he sat alone in his office, staring at her childhood drawings, and wondering when she stopped being his little girl and became the woman he was no longer strong enough to control. Emeka regained consciousness after 3 days of drifting in and out of pain and silence. When his eyes finally opened and focused on Zara, who had barely slept, a fragile smile tugged at his cracked lips. "You stayed," he whispered. Zara leaned over, gripping his hand tighter. I told you I wasn't leaving again. His voice was weak, but his spirit had not dimmed. They really did it, huh? He asked, nodding faintly toward the memory of the shop. Zara's eyes watered. They did. But they didn't take everything. I'm still here. You're still alive. And I'm not going to let them finish what they started. Emeka tried to sit up, groaning in pain, but she gently pressed him back. Rest. Just listen. She paused. I want us to leave this place. Leave this country if we have to. We can't keep living in fear. I have contacts. I can figure something out. We can start again together. At first, Emeka was silent. Run? He asked, a mix of disbelief and hope in his tone. You want to leave it all? Zara nodded. There's nothing left for me here. My father has finally stepped back. Brian will come again, and next time he won't miss. I don't want to lose you, Emeka. Not to fire. Not to pride. Not to anything. Emeka looked at her, his heart swelling with something deeper than love. Awe. She had truly walked away from wealth, from privilege. And now, she was willing to leave the country with a man who had nothing but scorched earth behind him. What if it doesn't work? He asked softly. What if we fail? She squeezed his hand tighter. Then we failed together. But at least we tried. At least we chose our own ending. That night, under a thin clinic blanket and a flickering bulb, the two lovers held hands and whispered promises of freedom. But they weren't alone. In the shadows outside the clinic, a car sat quietly. Engine off, lights dim. Inside was a man with trembling hands and eyes full of hate. Brian. He had come to confirm the destruction, to gloat over the wreckage. But instead, he found Zara by Emeka's side once again. No matter how much he tried to destroy their world, she kept rebuilding it with her bare hands. His lips curled. You think you're safe? He muttered. You think this is over? The driver glanced at him through the rearview mirror. Should we leave, sir? Brian didn't answer. His eyes stayed locked on the clinic window, his heart rotting with vengeance. If she won't come back willingly, then she'll never leave at all. The story ends for now with a whisper. They took everything from us, except the fire in our hearts. Part 2 begins. Thank you for watching this video. What did you learn from this story? Drop it in the comments. Please make sure you like, comment, and subscribe to my YouTube channel Tochi Stories for more.